Welcome to the Power and Light podcast. My name is Josiah Winnell, joined today by Jude Miley and Preston Graber. And today we will be talking about two NFL teams, but starting with one of the most complete, one of the most respected, one of the most accomplished franchises in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns. And in all honesty, it's probably the opposite for all of those things because the Cleveland Browns have been the laughingstock of the NFL in multiple occasions, but especially as of late. But could this be the moment that they turn around? The Cleveland Browns just had one of the most unique off seasons in a lot of different ways. It was unique because of their drafting, because of their signings, because of all of the stuff that has happened before this year and how it's affecting this year. And the influence of all of that, it made this offseason unique. And as we turn our calendar towards the summer and we start to look at OTAs and training camp and see what the Cleveland Browns are up to, could this be the change? Possibly, but we will see. So let's dive right into it with the biggest topic on everybody's mind when they think Cleveland Browns. It's the quarterback battle. Now, right now, it's a four-way competition among Kenny Pickett, a former Pittsburgh Steeler, Joe Flacco, a man who's jumped all over the league, Shedeur Sanders, and Dillon Gabriel, two recent draftees, both from this most recent draft class. And as most headlines say, there is no clear frontrunner. So Preston, I'm going to ask you a similar question that I asked you to set up most of these topics. How did we get here? And let's go back to the draft. What were the Cleveland Browns thinking?
Well, it's really interesting to think what the Browns were thinking because they started off the draft with their fifth overall pick and 33rd overall pick going defense in Mason Graham and Carson Schwarzenegger at linebacker. But then they decided full offense after that. So clearly they saw something in the draft that said, oh, listen, all of these offensive guys that we're interested in are going to fall past our first two picks, and then we're going to take them and just completely overhaul our offense right now. And we aren't going to make any offseason signings, and we're going to be good for the season. So that's where we're at right now.
Jude, I want you just to put on the headset real quick, or I guess the cap for most GMs, and pretend you're a general manager, and explain to me why you would ever take two quarterbacks in the same draft.
This is that one question that seems absurd. Like, why would you draft two quarterbacks in the same draft? And two high-profile quarterbacks, and the higher-profile quarterback seemingly before the draft was drafted after the first quarterback anyways. It seems really confusing, but I think it makes sense when you really dive into it. You pick Dillon Gabriel first because a majority of your guys are like, yeah, we want him. But then you realize Deion Sanders has a lot of influence in the media and just a lot of, I guess, aura And you realize Shedeur Sanders is available. And if you draft him, then it makes you look cool, I guess. Maybe your team gets a lot more fans and you start having people actually attend your home games. I mean, that would be a huge positive for the Cleveland Browns. So honestly, it makes sense when you think about it. Shedeur Sanders, sure, he's got a lot of potential talent, but he's also got the face, the allure of the fans, right? And so I think he's less of a football pick and more of a fan pick.
So let's break down what Jude just said. Essentially what Jude is saying is I think what is on a lot of people's minds right after that draft and during the decisions, trying to analyze what the Cleveland Browns were thinking. It sounds like the Dillon Gabriel pick was a football pick, roster building pick. And what Jude is saying, Shedeur Sanders was a business decision. Preston, break this down for me. I can kind of see through the muck how this is the case. Now, I think that the Cleveland Browns believe Shedeur Sanders could play football for them one day. But is that what this is? This is a business decision as well as a football decision, and these are two separate decisions made by potentially separate people.
I think it's a safety pick with the drafting of Shedeur Sanders personally. I mean, the fact that he slid that far and they took Gabriel before him, if Shedeur turns out to be something crazy good and he was still there and they pass on him and Gabriel turns out to be not the best quarterback, then it would have just made their franchise look really bad. So I do think the media presence is a thing, but Stefanski also had Dillon Gabriel as his second best quarterback on the board. And so he really just didn't want to look bad, I'm guessing. And so he saw Shador there and was like, yeah, we got to get him.
I think it's just something that you have to look at. And it doesn't always play out the way that you think. The cookie cutter model that some people have in their minds of the drafting strategy for some teams, you pick the 7 positions that you're most weak at, and let's draft at those positions. Well, there's depth, and there's some drafts versus and some positions and versus other years, and at certain times in the draft. And there's so many more different aspects of the draft than just what it is. But it is strange that that they would draft 2 similarly graded players, PFF, ESPN scales, whatever, similar. It's not like a first round and a 7th round pick for the quarterback. You pick your franchise quarterback in the first round, 7th round, you just draft a, backup quarterback that will come in. So it's interesting to look at. But I think the really strange thing for me is Deshaun Watson is still kind of in this picture. And I mentioned a 4-way battle, and all reality, some people believe that's for the backup position behind Deshaun Watson, but Watson doesn't have that starting role locked in. Preston, can you kind of explain the situation with Deshaun Watson right now? Because it's a little bit strange, but financially it's a really big issue for the Cleveland Browns. But I think people have kind of forgot about him as they start to analyze these 4 picks.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Watson tore his Achilles, and that was that, and we thought it was going to be that. But then he re-tore it again while in rehab, so that just sets him back even more. So I think that was kind of the move where they Browns bring in Pickett, Flacco, because at this rate, Watson's just like a very frail quarterback, and we've seen him go down and get injured multiple times when he's had the starting role. So I really do think they have a 5-man competition. If Watson can prove he can stay healthy, they could go with him, but they could very well go with any of the 4 other quarterbacks. I mean, a 5-man competition come training camp is just crazy to me for the quarterback position, but in reality, that's what they're running with.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, because in all reality, one of them has to get cut, potentially 2. I'm guessing just 1, but it depends, because right now, how do you say on any team, how do you cut, first of all, Shador Sanders or Dylan Gabriel? I mean, those are 2 talented quarterbacks, but then Kenny Pickett is a starting quarterback at one point in his career, a solid backup, and Joe Flacco is the guy who's been there, done it, and has won some crazy games. And, he's just sitting there in this, basically his lounge seat, also talking about how he's not a mentor, and he's got his ring, his Super Bowl. I mean, there's so many different aspects and different perks, if you will, that come with each quarterback that it just makes it really, really strange. So there's a lot to dive into here, but in all reality, you have to just see how it all plays out, because there's a lot of analyzing and a lot of things that you can talk about, but nobody knows except for who is in that front office what is going on in Cleveland. We just have to see how it plays out, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty even there, and they're going to try to figure it out, and they would rather have lots of options than just a few. And I think that's what they're doing, is they have a 1 in 5 chance they have 5 chances to win the lottery instead of just 2. And so their odds are better. This lottery is a little smaller than I would, guess, but then I would say that it's like Patrick Mahomes, but I think it's still there. So I think it's fine to move on and to let it play out. But I do want to ask everybody who they think is going to be the starting quarterback week 1. Just week 1. I'm curious who you think it will be. And my personal opinion is I actually think Kenny Pickett will. And the reason being is because I don't think he's he's obviously not as old as Joe Flacco, but he has the experience over those other 2 guys. So his versatility, his ability to just move the ball a little bit faster, I think that will make him the week 1 starter. I think he'll lose the job to one of the other guys, but I think week 1, he's the starter. Jude, who do you think is the week 1 starter for the Cleveland Browns?
I was at first leaning as well, Kenny Pickett, but at the same time, in my mind, I thought of this other line of reasoning, and I'm thinking Shador Sanders is going to start, because if the Cleveland Browns can create this competition between Shador and Dylan Gabriel, right, the rookie, make that a big headline, like the rookies are battling it out, Shador Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, one starting one week, one the next. Imagine how much motivation that could build. I just think that's the smart idea.
Yeah, it's like perfect for Hard Knocks if they cover. I mean, it's a storyline that people nationally, not just locally, will want to watch. Preston, who do you think is going to be that week 1 starter for the Cleveland Browns?
Personally, I think it's going to be Pickett or Flacco. Since I have to choose, I'll say Pickett just because there's more upside there than Flacco, and they probably want to see if they actually have anything. I mean, they traded DTR and a fifth round pick, so they have some stock in him. They have more stock in him than they do Shadur Sanders. So they're probably going to see what Pickett can give him, and then after that, it's up in the air. Yeah, he could lose the job, or he could be there for the whole season. You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, in their minds, they're probably hoping, all right, let's have, I mean, this would be perfect for them. Let's have a Sam Darnold type year with Kenny Pickett, because then you can kind of let Joe Flacco walk, or if you want to keep him around, put Deshaun Watson on the IR, but you've got Joe Flacco there, even if he doesn't say he is. He's naturally mentoring these guys just because he's older. And then those two guys develop, they get maybe in a couple reps, especially during the preseason, and you kind of let Kenny Pickett just carry this team into hopefully a playoff spot if you're in Cleveland. But they're hoping for a Sam Darnold type year from last year. But who knows? This could be really interesting, and there's always injuries that could happen. This could be really, really interesting. We'll see how it plays out. The last thing I will say is, Jude, I think you alluded to it, but I think that the Cleveland Browns are about to see possibly their regular season attendance go up, but their preseason attendance, I'm guessing, is going to go up because of the drama at the quarterback position. Moving on to some other positions for the Browns. The Cleveland Browns are in some significant financial constraints. They've got over $60 million in dead cap from the departures of Amari Cooper and Za'Darius Smith. Those two guys, big parts of this Cleveland Browns team, but also that's not even what I really care about. I mean, that's a significant amount of money, but the Deshaun Watson guaranteed money has been on the topics of multiple sports shows forever, but it just, ever since he signed that contract, but it feels like the Cleveland Browns are just kind of spending money like a drunken sailor. They don't really know where to put it at the right spots, and they're wasting a lot of the cap. They're not using it to its full capacity. Preston, is this an inaccurate response to how the Browns are using their money, or is this smart financial decisions as they look towards the future, trying to seek some type of financial freedom?
I mean, I think it's a great representation of what they have done. It's really just been terrible. There's no other way to describe the franchise and financial decisions. You don't give guaranteed money to anyone, much less fully guaranteed. And the fact that they did that, and even in light of everything that was going on with Deshaun Watson, is just beyond me. But, it's where they're at now. They have to move on from it. And so keeping guys who they want as the center stone and what people want to see, I wouldn't blame them. That's why I see them paying Myles Garrett, because everybody in Cleveland loves him. He's a good guy for Cleveland, and they need one of those players, because the person that was going to be that in Watson did not pan out.
So, Jude, this is where I come back to you, and I say, with all of these things that are going on, Preston just alluded to it, with all of these things going on, there's a bright, shining star for the Cleveland Browns, and that is Myles Garrett. And as many consider the top defensive end in the entire NFL, him signing that contract, that this highest paid contract back on March 9th of any non-quarterback, that says something about his commitment to Cleveland and his decision to stay there, even though everything else on this Browns team looks abysmal. Jude, what are your thoughts on Myles Garrett, number one, as a player? Phenomenal, but I want to hear what your thoughts are. But also his decision. What are your thoughts on his decision to stay in Cleveland despite all of these issues and really history of the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, I mean, I respect it. Honestly, I respect him. I respect Myles Garrett, and I mean his loyalty, right? Loyalty to a team, I think, is so important, because you're just going to play so much harder for them. When you truly love the team, you're going to play so much harder. Like, I'm sure if he got dropped in some random other team that he didn't necessarily want to be at, or, who just paid him the most, he might just not have as much to give because he's not as emotionally attached. And so I really think him being in a place where he's like, yeah, I like it here, and I'm attached to this team emotionally, I think that is just perfect for him. And so, yeah, it's just a perfect situation.
It's perfect for their defense because now they have that centerpiece that is phenomenal, and they can build around it. On the offensive side, expect them to, at least the Cleveland Browns, that is, to at least experiment with 2 tight end sets, because those sets are what help support inexperienced quarterbacks. So I'm curious to see if they bring in that 2 tight end set. And this, it ties perfectly into their emerging talent. I mean, obviously they have the 2 rookie quarterbacks. They have a few they have that first round pick. Solid picks across the board in terms of just analysis, but it was strange how the order that it went. But really the shining star right now through OTAs has been rookie tight end Harold Fannin Jr. And the analysis of him is that he is going to play a significant role, especially if they shift to that 2 tight end set to support the inexperienced quarterbacks. My final question as we move on from the Cleveland Browns is this a playoff team? And I am hesitant to say yes because of the uncertainty at quarterback, as well as the difficulty in all reality of not only that division, but just the AFC in general. So my answer is no. Preston, is this Cleveland Browns team, as you see it right now, a playoff team this year?
I don't think they are this year simply because of the division they're in. I really do like their team, though. I like their running back room now that they've drafted Judkins and Sampson. I love their tight end room. They basically drafted another Njoku and Harold Fannin. The only thing that scares me about them is they don't have any O-line depth, and so if anyone gets injured, it's going to be a hurting time for the quarterback, man. It's just going to be another Deshaun Watson sack scenario, but it probably won't be Deshaun. So I do not think they will be making the playoffs.
Jude, what about you? Do you think the Browns will be in the playoffs this year?
No, I'm just so hesitant to ever say yes to the Browns making the playoffs. Yeah, the quarterbacks, to me, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, you don't know your quarterback right now? How can you build a confident team if you don't even know who your quarterback's going to be? That just seems like a recipe for disaster.
It's different situations and it's completely different histories, but the Pittsburgh Steelers had a defensive star in TJ Watt, and they continue to make it to the playoffs. And I'm curious if the Browns could follow a similar blueprint within their division with Myles Garrett and try to build around him and eventually carry them to the playoffs. But here's what I do know. Unless one of these quarterbacks pan out, this is not a recipe for winning championships. It might be a recipe to make the wild card round a few times, but right now they need one of those quarterbacks to show up and show out to really get something out of this Cleveland Browns team in what will be called the Myles Garrett era. All right, moving to the NFC, we move to the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, they drove all over the success of Sam Darnold, but he is gone. And now it's time for last year's rookie, but now delayed debut of JJ McCarthy, the draft pick from Michigan, the man who took that Wolverines team to a college football championship. It's now time for him, but it's just a potential time for him. He has not secured that starting role at all. Preston, give us an overview of the Minnesota Vikings offseason and any thoughts that you have for them as we approach double digits days until the start of the NFL season.
Well, the Minnesota Vikings, they really tried to do a lot and unfortunately did not come up with a lot in return. They did bring back star cornerback Byron Murphy Jr., and that will be a good anchor there on the defense for them. And they made an interesting move in a trade for Sam Howell at potentially backup, potentially starting quarterback. I'm sure we'll get to that. And they also traded for running back Jordan Mason, who came onto the scene pretty big for the Niners last year. But we'll see how they do. Their draft looked really good. They only had 5 picks in the draft, actually, but they made the most of it.
I think they went and did what they could, like you said, made the most that they could with the draft, but also in free agency, adding some guys that will add some depth both on the offensive and defensive side. And when you look at all of the guys that they add as they try to bolster their offensive line and improve their pass rushers room, I think that what the Vikings are doing is setting themselves up for an eventual star quarterback to come in and carry it and take a team that has a lot of talent all over the place. Because obviously you have Justin Jefferson, we got to have somebody to throw him the ball. But that person who's throwing him the ball needs protection on the offensive side. And then also, if you're scoring a lot, you want a defense that can shut down the other team. So, I mean, it's just basic football knowledge, but I think they're setting themselves up for JJ McCarthy to be really good. But if not, it's a plug-and-play position where they don't have big issues to go draft a quarterback. It's not going to be a massive issue. Jude, I just want you to break down what you know of JJ McCarthy's game, his time at Michigan. I wasn't incredibly impressed. I didn't think that this guy had overwhelmingly impressive skills at the quarterback position, but he did win a college football championship, and he was a part of that crazy quarterback draft class 2 years ago that involved 6 of the first 12 picks being quarterbacks. So I'm curious, what is your thoughts on him in that draft class that pretty much all of those other guys have panned out in some way, mostly positive?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a fine player, but I'm always hesitant, to put a bunch of confidence in a quarterback, who's coming off an injury. Because to me, quarterback, sure, it's a position that you need skills and a strong arm, but it's also a position of confidence. Like, you've got to be confident in the quarterback position. So coming off an injury like that, I'm always wondering, how is your confidence? How do you feel having not, played in an actual live football game, in a while? So that's the biggest concern I would have, especially in a conference with defenses like the Packers defense, which is just going to come after you, and, you got to be ready for that.
Preston, from what you can see right now, do you believe at all that the Vikings, with what they have right now, are positioned to compete in this very competitive NFC North? And if you don't, I don't want you to take too much from what the competition of the other teams are, because it's so talented. But I'm curious, what are the major flaws that you see in this Minnesota Vikings team? Jude just alluded to one of them with the quarterback health. But what do you think the major flaws that will hold them back from being competitive in this competitive NFC North division?
I mean, I think what will hold them back is clearly their offense. I mean, last year they had a top 5 defense, and they did nothing but add to it this offseason, so we can't really take much away from that. Their O-line is a little bit in the gray area. I mean, I see their 5 starters, and then aside from that, not much. And one of those starters is a rookie, which they drafted in the first round, Donovan Jackson, who I'm assuming are hoping takes the right or left guard position. But aside from that, I'm not seeing much depth, and that could come back to hurt them, especially with the good pass rush from the other defenses in the NFC North. That puts JJ McCarthy at some risk if he ends up winning the starting job.
Jude, they may not win the NFC North, but if they don't, do you still believe that this NFC North firepower from last year, the Minnesota Vikings, with the Lions and the Packers knocking on the door, the Bears potentially could be good? All these guys, all of these teams that are competing for spots in the NFC playoffs, do you think the Vikings are an NFC playoff team?
I do not think so. And when I look at playoff teams, I'm really looking for past season playoffs. Like, how have you been in recent years? Are you ready to make a jump? A big jump is really hard to make, but are you ready to make a medium jump to the Super Bowl or, at least a conference championship? And for the Vikings, I just don't think they're ready to make that jump. I think they've had some good regular seasons, but I can't say, they've had a nice playoff run where it was that close to working out. Like, I don't like them right now.
I think their team is too different. When you switch starting quarterbacks after having a year so successful like last year, I think this is going to be a difficult one to not turn into a recession. So the Minnesota Vikings, it will be difficult. Any team could make the playoffs. But as we see it right now, the Minnesota Vikings are still missing some key pieces to make that a reality. All right. We would wrap up the episode right now, but there's some big news in the Kansas City area. Preston, there's rejoicing in the streets. There's excitement on every corner of Kansas City on both sides of state line, because the next hopefully the next shining star of this Kansas City Royals baseball team is on his way. Preston, share the good news with all of our listeners.
The Royals have done it. They have called up Jac Caglianone, and in a shocking move, 2 weeks before the arbitration set in, we decided to call him up because we are in desperation mode and we need to win games now.
We just talked about this, and I mentioned it on the show. I said, wait 2 weeks, right? I said, be patient, Royals fans, because we want to be in a good arbitration spot a few years from now when he's extremely talented, asking for lots of money. We want to be in a good spot to delay that a year. And I think Preston kind of agreed with me, but also said, they're ultimately a couple years from now, though, it doesn't take the precedence that this year does right now. And here's the reality. The Royals need power hitting. We're not going to break down everything that we said on that last episode, but let's be honest. They need some power hitting, and Jack can bring that to this Royals team. A guy that was drafted 6th overall in 2024 has ascended through this minor league system as quick as anybody. And the promotion to the MLB in less than a year is incredible. But he played so well in the minor leagues this year. Now, Preston mentioned it in that last episode. He struggled in high A ball, but once he got out of spring training, he was set on fire and has still not wavered. Preston, what does he have to do, though, at this major league level now, with the expectations so high that he'll be a power bat, to not completely extinguish that fire and risk heading back down to Omaha?
I mean, right now I think that the Royals and Cags are in it for the long haul. I don't see a way in which he does get sent back down, even if he doesn't perform well, because we saw what he did in AA and AAA. But what the Royals need from him and what he needs to understand is that he's not gonna just come be the savior of the Kansas City Royals. We have pitching to rely on, but we just need someone that can hit the baseball hard, and that's exactly what he can do. We need someone that can hit with runners in scoring positions, and he's done that. I mean, we said it in the last episode. He's led the minor leagues in RBI so far this year. So I think if he just does what he's been doing, attacking early in counts, pitchers are going to try and get ahead of him quickly because he's a rookie. That's how they all work. Then if he attacks those early strikes, he'll be fine. I mean, Vinny said that he touches the baseball when it goes out of the park. So that's all you need to know, really.
That can hit the ball hard. Yeah, he has an average exit velo of 94.9 miles per hour. That's insane. But, that could be occasional if he hit the ball once in a while. But no. He has a hard hit rate. 60% of the balls that he hits are hard hit. He makes contact, and that ball is going to be flying off the bat. And this is perfect right now for the Royals, who, like I mentioned, are struggling with their power hitting. Jude, we talked about it earlier with Shedeur Sanders and the fans and all of the media. But what do you think the impact of bringing a guy on like this to this roster that is pretty young and is kind of looking for an ignition, a little ignite, a little catalyst to get this team rolling on exciting ball like last year when they got the boys are playing some ball run? The Royals need that right now. They need this little flash. What do you think the impact in terms of fans coming to the stadium and being excited about this baseball team? What do you think his impact will promote and ignite that?
Yeah, I think it's already had an impact. I can say for me personally, I'm not like a passionate Royals specific fan, but even just this guy getting moved up, I've read articles on it. I've seen articles showing up on the news feed on the Google News. And so that gets me interested. And so I think just having somebody new, like a spark, really, what you want to find is a spark. And once you get a spark, you can start a huge forest fire. So it's really all about just finding something to cheer for, finding something to get behind that you can say, okay, this is what we want to cheer for. And you get fans that are like, okay, we've got something new to cheer for, something that we can at least put a little bit of hope in the hope that it will grow into something bigger. That's really what you want, and that's what you got here.
The Royals have really good starting pitching. That's just the reality of the situation. We talked about it. Preston and I talked about it. They have quite a few guys that can just absolutely dominate. And we see it to continue. I mean, Chris Bubich just pitched a gem and got a loss because the Royals just couldn't get a run across the plate. The Royals have the pitching of a World Series elite level team. That is the reality right now. The starting pitching, our bullpen, it has some work to do, but it's there too. I mean, there is so much talent from those guys who are throwing the ball every single day off the bump. The hitting, the offense, there's the pieces. Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Massey having a year, but they just need that one more guy, in my opinion, to just ignite the flame of, all right, here's some true offense. Because right now they rank second to last at the time of his call-up in Major League Baseball with 194 runs. And that's just abysmal for a team that, as ironic as it sounds, they're a winning baseball team. They're above 500 team with even that stat. So they are just a little bit of offense away from being a dominant team, and they have to be. They have to start playing really good baseball if they want to go eventually catch up to Detroit. This last series was difficult. Dropping two of those 3 games, that makes your deficit to go grab the top spot in the AL Central so much more difficult. So it will be really interesting to see how this plays out and when he comes up, the impact that he makes. Preston, from what you know of rookies, this call-up and of the history of the Royals, this call-up seems very exciting to me because it seems very similar to the years previous to 2014 and 2015 because all of these young guys called up, but slowly, they slowly came up, and you had Mike Moustakas. There was a couple trades, Mike Moustakas, Eric Hosmer, a lot of guys that were homegrown, and that's what we've got right now. Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, these guys are coming up, and I think that this addition will be very, very significant. Any final thoughts from you, Preston, as we wrap up this episode and Jude prepares the quote of the day?
I think it's a great time to be a Kansas City fan right now. Having Cags, having Bobby Witt Jr., having Patrick Mahomes in our city. What more can you ask for? We have some of the big stars coming up for the Royals, and we have the best star in Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes.
It's an exciting time for sure, and we're here for it. We're enjoying every moment of it, and we're excited for potential another Kansas City Royals postseason run. But it's got to start right here. It's got to start in the regular season. Will he ignite the flame that starts the forest fire, as Jude so eloquently said it? All right, Jude, send us out of episode 55 with today's quote of the day.
Okay, today's quote of the day, kind of relates to the Royals, making the choice right now to start the spark right now. And the quote is by General George S. Patton, and it says, "A good plan violently executed right now is far better than a perfect plan executed next week."